Marvel Snap has just introduced one of the best features they've ever made, and I kind of wonder if it's not something they should have been doing all along. That's right. They're doing pre-constructed decks. Now, for those who are not familiar with how other trading card games in this genre work, pre-constructed decks are very often the earliest thing you will find that introduces you to the game. They're a fully playable deck that allows you to just jump into actually playing the game, although they are very rarely competitive at the highest level of play or even at a moderate level of play. What Marvel Snap has done is introduce 4 pre-constructed decks at various spots on the new player experience. I'm excited that these pre-constructed decks exist because the new player experience is where Marvel Snap has needed the most help when we look at the overall arc of Marvel Snap's life cycle. One thing that I think many people will be slightly upset about, though, is that these decks do not exist for players that are not on the new player experience. The way it works is, as part of the new player experience, you get a little sort of advent calendar type of thing. On day 2, you get a deck. On day 5, you get a deck. On day 10, you get a deck. And on day 28, you get a deck. Those 4 decks are only for new players, and obviously you can see from what's on screen right now, there's actually a pretty decent amount of nice cards in these pre-constructed decks that the new players are getting. I would encourage anyone watching this video whose first instinct is, man, why do the new players get this and we don't, to sort of shelve that belief until a little bit later in the video, because we are going to be talking about it. But first, let's take a look at all of the pre-constructed decks that new players will be getting in order: day 2, day 5, day 10, and day 28. The first pre-constructed deck, the Day 2 pre-constructed deck, is Ultron Swarm. This is a super simple, basic zoo list that simply adds Ultron to a group of cards that you probably already have, while not being prescriptive in a way that I think is fairly interesting. Keeping in mind what the new player experience is, remember that Blue Marvel is the card that you get from completing the Recruit Season Pass, so making it go in this deck probably doesn't make a ton of sense, because otherwise, what's the point of doing the Recruit Season Pass? This is very obviously a deck that has cards that will be relevant for the new player experience. There is another implementation issue here, though, which is what happens when you unlock a card that is in a deck that you got from the deck, and what happens when you get a card from a deck that you then unlock on the track. My understanding is what will happen is the fallback reward is 155 boosters, because, you know, these are Series 1 cards. You're not going to like absolutely lose your mind if you're not getting insane value for getting what I guess you would call a duplicate. You do get a full split's worth of boosters from it. Not the greatest thing in the world, but not enough to make me feel bad about the implementation as a whole. This deck is effectively just introducing Ultron into Series 1. That's a reasonable enough thing to do. That's a card that is really good with strategies that are already really good in Series 1. I think that is a very solid direction to go for your first ever Precon, especially because it hooks in so well with the card you get from completing the Recruit Season Pass, Blue Marvel. On day 5, you get a deck called Powerful Panther. This is a sort of on-reveal themed deck, which I think is an interesting direction to go, because my first instinct when I hear on-reveal themed deck is I really would like to put a Wong in here, but I do think that putting a Wong in the new player experience would likely mean that that would be so far and away the best deck by doing Wong Odin things that it would necessitate other decks play Cosmo. You probably don't want your new player experience to be about metagames. You want your new player experience to be fun and enjoyable, and so you probably don't put the full combo in here, but it does make it a little bit harder to do an on-reveal deck, I think. One card that I think I might have liked seeing in here is maybe Namora. That's the kind of thing where it's like, all right, it's not Wong, but at least maybe that is something that makes a little more sense as an ongoing theme. This deck is effectively introducing Drax from Series 3 into the new player experience, which obviously should happen. I don't understand why Drax is Series 3 in the first place. And of course, Black Panther himself being introduced from Series 3 4, 5. I don't actually know what series Black Panther is. He was the first season pass card in the full season release of the game. The game released in October. Miles was the season pass card, but it released on like October 17th. And so you only had 13 days to do that season pass. Black Panther was the November season pass of the year of the game's release. And I think it's probably long overdue that a card like that made it into this kind of experience. One other card that I'm a little bit sad is not in here is Arnim Zola. If I'm putting a Black Panther deck together, I want to be playing Arnim Zola, right? Like if I can't get Wong, but I have Black Panther, I want Arnim Zola. And it does make me a little bit sad that they have opted to be as sort of cautious as they were with that kind of thing. I think maybe Arnim Zola is just the kind of card that is not very obviously good in the way that it is. Like, if you give a new player Black Panther Arnim Zola, will they understand that that works the way that it does? Will they get it? Will they be like, oh, that's awesome, that's cool, I really want to do that, I want to play for it? Or will they just be like, I don't really get it, and this card, this 6-drop has 0 on it, and it kind of sucks, and I don't want to deal with it? I'm not sure. I think it kind of depends on how much respect you have for new players as like people that are willing to like invest themselves in the game and how much respect you should have for that. My instinct is that you can respect them a little bit more and give them the Arnim Zola. But I mean, of course I would think that, right? I'm the competitive guy. Here is where the decks start getting pretty scarily close to decent. This is the deck you get on day 10. It is called Mystique Mirror. And I gotta tell you, this is like a Moonstone and a Sam Wilson away from being pretty close to a legitimate deck you could play right now. Like, there are some other cards you want. A Captain Carter, maybe you're doing Anti-Venom Luke Cage, maybe you're doing, you know, Shadow King and some other tech pieces, but like, you are getting scarily close to, we have just given you an actual ongoing deck. And a lot of that is a lot of the ongoing cards are like relatively cheap, and outside of stuff like Sam Wilson and Moonstone, there's really not a lot to go get. And so in line with that, like obviously getting Mystique early in the collection track is the biggest boost that you can get from a deck like this. Mystique Devil Dino is the kind of thing that is really interesting once you've unlocked this deck. If you are a new player, that is just a lot of power. The big thing to keep in mind is that in Series 1, the best tech card in the game is by far Enchantress, and that includes in Series 2. There just aren't a lot of things that Enchantress won't deal with that Shang-Chi will deal with. Enchantress is sort of the premier thing. So playing into that is not ideal, but getting Mystique this early is really, really, really cool. One thing that I don't love is the Omega Red. That just feels like the ongoing equivalent of the Drax, where it's like, yeah, I mean, this is legally speaking, it's a Series 3, but come on now. Like, that's part of what I get out of that, where it's like, all right, I don't really, that doesn't excite me in a meaningful way. The Mystique stuff does excite me. I just wish that that card was like a Moonstone. You know what I mean? And I get maybe that's, again, too complex of a card. Maybe Sam Wilson requires too much movement. I think there are real arguments that aren't just like these cards are expensive, but also these cards are complicated in a way that might not make them appealing to a new player, I think is a real concern for those two cards specifically. But I do wish there was something else here, because a lot of these decks, what you're looking at is like, what am I getting that isn't something I'm already getting for free as a part of just leveling up through Series 1 and 2? And to have the answer to that be Omega Red, it's like, all right, I'm not very excited about that. Let's just start with me not being very excited about that. The Day 28 deck is a significant upgrade to the new player experience. Like, we can talk about how the other 3 decks aren't incredibly special. I don't think they have to be incredibly special when you're getting Thanos and Cull Obsidian on Day 28. Thanos is the card of Marvel Snap. Like, in as much as there is one card that has consistently shown up in various metagames and is a game plan in and of itself, I would argue that card is Thanos. Thanos is the face of this game. It's Marvel Snap, after all. Like, that's half of the tie-in. That's half of the name. Thanos is an amazing character, one of the most popular Marvel characters. And in this game, Thanos is one of the most interesting and unique cards. And I think this being the card you get on day 28 for free is a really big deal. Now, remember when I said we would table discussions of, wow, why are new players getting this and old players aren't? This one was like explicitly kind of what I was getting at, right? A bunch of new players getting Thanos for free. They're probably like players who play this game who aren't getting Thanos for free. So what's up with that? Well, the good news is there will be a Thanos reward in the upcoming Grand Arena, which includes, obviously it's a Thanos variant, but it comes with the card Thanos. So if you are one of those players who is like, well, I'm not getting a free Thanos, don't worry. You actually are going to get a free Thanos in the next Grand Arena. So you got that going for you. I don't know if it's free or like play some games free. Unclear on that, but I do know Thanos will be in the next Grand Arena, including the actual base card Thanos, so you shouldn't be too upset about it. Now, what else is going on here, though, is Cull Obsidian, and I realize that's only a Series 4 card, but it does make me wonder if there's a way to distribute that to players as well. This is probably the most interesting thing that this patch has, because obviously there are implications to like, all right, well, they can do precons now. Is there going to be a chance that we can go out and buy these precons? Can we acquire these for ourselves? Is that a thing we can do? That conversation to me is worth talking about, but we're going to table it for just a bit and talk specifically about what this does for new players, because this is very close to a functional deck. Is it a tier 1 deck? No. There are cards in here that are super mid. Obviously, we got Bishop, we got Wolfsmith, we got all this, right? But this right here, this is a very, like, if you'd played this in 2023, you could have pulled off wins with this. Like, that's just how it is. Is this a top tier elite meta deck? No, not really. But it is the closest this game has gotten to, like, a legitimate precon, I think. Precons in other games range from, like, almost totally unplayable to, like, you could play this at a casual competitive level. And I think that's what we're seeing with these precons. They are ranging from almost totally unplayable to you would not be embarrassed. Like, if I had to play against this deck, I'd be like, they're playing some bad cards, but fundamentally, they're still playing Thanos. Obviously, if we're talking about upgrades, the biggest upgrade you could probably get to your Thanos deck is Mockingbird. That's a card you're very interested in. A lot of what I'm talking about in this video, I didn't really talk about like how to upgrade these decks until we got to the last two, because I don't think the other ones resemble competitive archetypes in a meaningful enough way that upgrading them is a conversation you should even be having. But the last two, like the ongoing one, Sam Wilson, Moonstone, definitely a conversation to be had about that. Captain Carter, conversation to be had about that. Those are cards you should target if you're like, I like this deck and I want to make it better. Thanos, again, like you look at just a couple of the things that this could do. Mockingbird is an obvious thing that you really want to make better. Like, this is a deck you can take the core of and build outward from there in a meaningful way. And I think that's the most important thing about these precon decks, is not that they be meta decks immediately, but that there is a clear path to becoming one. Interestingly, I suspect that the deck with the clearest path to becoming a meta deck, though, is still the ongoing one. That is very close to, like, legitimate meta deck territory. You get a Captain Carter in there, you get a Sam Wilson in there, you get a Moonstone in there, and suddenly you're really not far off of what an actual ongoing deck looks like. You just have to customize, like, tech spots and things of that nature, and you're kind of in business. This is a lot farther off what a real Thanos deck looks like, but Thanos as a floor is so much higher than so many other things that you just kind of get to skate on that if you're the people making these decks, I think. So on the whole, getting Thanos for free is awesome. Getting Cull Obsidian for free is awesome. This whole concept is awesome. But there are a couple of other things to talk about. One of the biggest things that this has made me think about is, what is the applicability of a system like this to the larger player base? Because obviously new players need this help. I think it is abundantly clear to anyone who has played Marvel Snap that giving new players more ways to immediately engage with the cool cards in this game, like Thanos, is nothing but upside. For those of us who may look at this and say, that's better than the new player experience I got, I would encourage you to be a little more open-minded instead of just saying like, well, I wish I got that. Because, yeah, I mean, I think we all wish we got more free stuff, but the game only survives if it brings in new players. And this is something I think we can all agree we would have preferred to have, and thus we can at least try to be happy for the people that will have it. One thing that this should make you think about, though, is what is the version of this for the returning player experience look like? Right now, the returning player experience is kind of a grab bag of weird stuff, and I appreciate that they're working on both new and returning players, and I'm not sure which one they should be prioritizing more, although I strongly suspect that the answer is they should be prioritizing new players. I do think that this kind of concept is really well executed, because I think a lot of people talk about, we want precons, we want to be able to do stuff like this. I don't know that enough people talk about, like, how do we execute those within the confines of Marvel Snap's collection system? Because when you think about Marvel Snap as a whole, basically it was like, we're going to rework what a card game is, and we're going to rework what collecting cards is. And I think it would be pretty fair to say that, no offense to anyone involved, the reworking of what a card game was a lot more successful than the reworking of what collecting cards was. The part of Marvel Snap that is gameplay was an incredibly successful bet. The part of Marvel Snap that is acquisition and monetization has been less successful. And I think that this move more back towards traditional methods of card game acquisition, to me, feels like a move in the right direction, because what Marvel Snap has that succeeded is the gameplay, and what Marvel Snap has that didn't succeed is the acquisition. So the more we can get closer to doing stuff like this within the confines of Marvel Snap's collection system, the better off I think everyone is. I do wonder how you would do this in different constraints, though, because, like I said, I looked at these decks and I was like, I think they did pretty well. I think these are pretty well constructed precons that also don't totally blow up the series system. And while as much as I would like to say they should just blow up the series system, I do think that's actually like a hard thing to do, and bridging that gap that they're bridging is actually pretty important. So I guess my question to you is, what would it look like to do this for returning players? Is that a thing that can be done? Because the biggest problem for making precons is that everyone's collection is different. And the reason it can work for new players is that everyone's collection is different when you're a new player within a lot of specific constraints. Like when you finish Series 2, you have the same collection as anyone else who finished Series 2. You just got there in a bit of a different order, which makes it a lot easier to say, I know that this card would be good for you, because you know what they have. But once you start getting into Series 3 and start unlocking cards on the track or with tokens, then things get very individualized very quickly, and it becomes a lot harder to make a precon that would be meaningful to a large subset of people. So I guess my question is, I love the concept, I love the execution, how can this be expanded? And that's something that I think is actually a harder question to answer than you might think. As always, I have been KMBest, you have been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one.